Alright, welcome back. So I'm sorting out a few small things. I've got the kickstand now figured out though. I have a kickstand on the bike from a Honda CB900. It's a 2005 919 Hornet, but it fits just perfectly. The rear suspension is a little bit higher than it was stock, so I needed a slightly longer kickstand, but I've been all over the place with kickstands on this bike. So the bike came with this monstrosity, which looks pretty custom built. I'm not sure, it looked like at one point it was a kickstand that they added about 2 or 3 inches of space in the middle. Also apparently spun around the top piece here, and lots of creative welding down here. So it looked terrible, it sat awkward, and it was way too long. So the bike, when I bought it, had 400mm rear shocks. Stock, it's supposed to have 300mm shocks. And I assume they built this to accommodate for the change in that, although I don't know why they raised the rear so much in the first place. But anyway, definitely had to get rid of this. My next attempt was to purchase the stock kickstand for the CB650, but with my rear suspension and tire configuration, I am running the bike slightly higher than it was stock, so this also didn't work. I was looking to potentially modify this to be slightly longer, but I found that the, again, CB900 kickstand would fit just perfectly. So I also purchased the original spring for this kickstand. I was able to find a new old stock version of it, so it's painted black with the rubber protector and it's in perfect shape. And I also had this powder coated. It had the same patina as the original kickstand, but with the powder coating in the same semi-gloss black as the frame, everything looks really good now. The stock kickstand that I purchased worked, but the bike was leaning over too much. With the new 919 kickstand though, the bike leans over just about the same angle that the ZX6R does. So enough that the bike is upright, not looking to tip over, but not so much that it could potentially tip over the other way if a little pressure was applied. I also used the same drop mirrors both on the left and right side that I put on the Monkey and the other CT builds that I've done so far. I think it's a pretty clean, classic look. It's out of the way, but it provides the functionality that I need to see what's going on behind me. Check out these super high quality reproduction tank badges that I got for the bike. This is made by a company called Yamiya750, but a fantastic quality piece. They're pretty expensive. The set of badges with the mounting plugs were about $100, but the quality is amazing. I've also got the top triple clamp off because I'm making mounting brackets for the gauges that I'm installing on the bike. I did have a mishap though as I was taking off the top fork nut. I didn't realize that just one side of the spring wasn't enough to hold up the front end, and when I popped it off, it shot off like a cork. Fortunately, the wrench didn't hit my face. It didn't really do any damage to the handlebar that it hit, and the fork nut didn't hit the car or anything else in the garage, because that was the first concern as I was walking around trying to figure out what the hell actually happened. I'm also happy that the security camera caught it for the entertainment value of it. I need to put together a bloopers reel of all the stupid stuff that camera catches me doing. And while I have it off, I'm going to replace the air assist system that's on the bike. The air assist is a neat feature, but I really don't like the way that it looks with that hose connecting the 2 fork tubes. I think it just really takes away from the overall look of the bike. So I found these pieces that has the same 31mm by 1.5 threads that fit into this perfectly. I've also ordered some progressive springs and spacers to finish that out so that the ride quality is good, but this will hopefully clean up the overall look. Here at the top is the new progressive springs that I bought, and right below it is the original spring, just to show for comparison. The overall length is the exact same, but you can see that on the progressive spring, the springs are wound much more tightly through most of it, and then at the bottom is wound much closer, so that you have some plushness, but that under heavy braking or if you hit a pothole, it prevents the front shocks from bottoming out. The kit also came with these white spacers that you cut to size. They're effectively just pieces of PVC pipe. There's also a washer that goes in between the spring and the pipe to preload the shocks so that you prevent having any sag when there isn't load on the bike. So the instructions say that it doesn't matter if the tightly wound coils go on the bottom or the top. It says if it goes on the bottom, it might help prevent rattling noise, so that's the direction that it'll go. You then add a washer. The cut down PVC pipe I went down to 1 inch, and that fits neatly over this new plug that I have, and you screw it down. I'm going to need to get somebody to raise the handlebars so that I don't have to compress the spring quite as much, so that I can load this down and seal it up. I've got the new fork nuts in, and I think it really cleans up the front end of the bike. These fork bolts are also pretty unfinished. There's a lot of machining marks, but it only took me a couple of minutes to file down some of those marks and a few different grades of sandpaper to having it look pretty good. After I get all the marks out, I'll do a light polish, and that should have them looking as good as the steering nut. I've been doing a lot of riding, and I found 2 more oil leaks on this bike. Both look like they're pretty easy to fix though. One was the seal coming out of the shift shaft right here. So there was just a grommet right here. This is what it looks like after I pulled it out. And then I also seem to be getting a leak out of the starter motor area. It had a rubber grommet that actually is pretty flat on the sides. I think it's just been in there for 40 years and it had had enough, but oil was leaking from there too. Anyway, both of these are easy enough to replace. The replacement should arrive and I'll be back on the bike in a couple of days. So I polished up the fork nuts a bit. I've got the gauges on and all wired up, both for electricity. Now the lights come on in the gauges when the headlight is on. And I also have the tachometer and wheel monitor hooked up. So I can't test it yet since I don't have the starter on, and I'm waiting to get those gaskets so that I can fix those 2 leaks. But once I do, everything should be good. I did test it with my drill though, and the gauge is spun, so I assume everything is good to go. All right, and one last thing. My wife sewed one of those 125 kilohertz RFID chips into the pointer finger of this glove, so now if I just goose the bike, I get power on. Anyway, pretty cool feature and better than carrying that keychain around in my pocket and having to pull it out when I want to turn the bike on and off. So this will probably be the last video before my final build overview video, because once I get those 2 gaskets received and those minor oil leaks fixed, I think this bike is done. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody following this build. Stay tuned for that last video. Thanks a lot.